Hello, I'm Santi from Peachworlds, and today I'm going to talk about how quickly and efficiently you can create a new 3D website by using one of our templates. This time we're going to talk about Sodium AI template, and I'm going to be creating, together with my colleague Bura, a brand new beauty product website. I'm going to cover all of the 3D scene part in this tutorial, where I'm going to talk about how to import new 3D scene, new 3D files, quickly, efficiently, with ease in Peachworlds editor, and my colleague Bura will cover all of the 2D UI part as well. So this is going to be an exciting one. Let's dive in. We are in Sodium AI 3D scene at the moment, and we're going to start by deleting all of the 3D assets that we're not going to be using for our new beauty 3D template. And I think that will be all the assets because we have a new 3D models prepared already for it, so we're going to be uploading them later. You can delete those assets from the scenes by just deleting them one by one, or you can delete these assets by just clicking on them in the left assets panel. So for example, I'm just have a tile basic, and I'm just going to keep selecting all of the assets that I don't need and just delete them in this way. So we are left with quite a clean scene with just a few lights, and we also have this wall opener, and I'll show you what it is. We're going to keep this one, this model particularly, because we're going to be using the same model in our new scene. And let's go back into the 3D scene. From here we can start setting up our new look. We will change the background color quickly to a little bit more pinkish. And then we're going to look at the water. At the moment we have a water shader, but you can't really see anything because there's no objects. Let's start putting some of the key elements into our scene. And one of those elements is a path that is going to be kind of essential part. We're traveling on this path, through this path, and on the sides of the path we're going to be adding some architectural abstract elements to make the scene look beautiful. Let's have a quick preview. We have a path that we're going to be following in this template until we reach the end, and obviously revealing our product. After that, we're going to have a new 2D UI. Let's go back into our 3D scene and start adjusting more parameters and uploading more of the assets into our scene. Before I will upload other 3D assets, I'm going to set up the water. Basically, when you have just a water shader in, what I've discovered and what I think works really nice, if you're actually putting plain object under the water and selecting specific color for it. So let's set that up and I'll show you what it does exactly in our scene. What you will start seeing now is that you have quite a nice effect with the water and the colored plane under. What I think is kind of gives it a nice effect, and also you can see the reflection from the water, from the waves. That's kind of a nice effect to have. So that's a good tip. We're using plane with the water shader. Okay, so we are happy with our water effect right here, and we will start uploading the rest of the assets into the editor. So we have our lily now added into the scene, and we're going to start placing these objects accordingly to how we would like them to be set up in our scene. Okay, so I think we covered the process in terms of starting adding the assets into your 3D scene, and I'm going to fast forward the process. You can actually see it in a time-lapse format because it will take some time for me to put all of the assets into the scene, and then we will get back again and talk about some effects that we can apply, some of the animations of specific objects, of new objects that we added into the scene, and just wrap up this whole tutorial. So let's dive in. All right, our scene is almost set up. A couple of things left to do is to add a few animated objects and our main object in the scene, as well as adding effects, working with colors, prettifying the scene itself, and just sort of finessing the last details. Let's go back into our editor. And what I'm going to start with is I'm going to start adding those intermediary animations of two different objects that will help to tell a story about a product and also add some dynamic effects into our overall experience. Let's add those assets here. I call them ingredient small 1, ingredient small 2, and ingredient small 3. Let's add them all into the scene. And as you can see, they're all already in the right position. And the reason for that is that because I already done it in my 3D software. In this case, I'm using Cinema 4D, but you might be using Blender or something else. It just makes it easier for you to set it up in this way. So those objects are, in the specific position. What we want to do as well is to create a group and group these objects together. To make the group of these objects, I'm going to just use a simple cube object, which I'm going to add in my scene. And you cannot see it, but it's basically added into the scene next to our objects. And I'm going to just make this cube very small. So probably we'll use a 0.5 because we don't really want to see it. We can make it transparent, but for this purpose, we're just going to make it very small and use it in that way. Okay, so I have my cube. I'll make all of the elements here children of this cube object. Now we have our group. We will call it ingredient 1 group, and we have our group together. Now we can start moving it around and sort of adjusting it to fit our UI that already exists from the old template. All right, let's move our object into the better position for us for the animation that we planned. Oops, let's click the group and move the whole group here, because this is the first thing that we're going to be seeing after going through the gates in our scrolling animation. I think it's too big at the moment, and we're going to resize all of these assets inside. So probably choose it as 100. So half size. And by the way, if you see these numbers are huge, it's because I made the cube very small. So basically, these objects are showing a different kind of sizing now, but it's fine. You can just use that for the moment. We have our sizing, and now we're going to just preview quickly. All right, let's scroll forward. And as you can see, it's a little bit too high. We want it to be kind of in the right position according to the UI that is here. We will change the UI after, but we're going to keep the position in the same place. So we're going to just adjust the objects to match with the UI. Let's go back to the editor and let's move our group, whole group, into the desired position. And I think it's probably going to be like 1.7 in terms of the height, a little bit more. Let's have a look again. All right, so that looks perfect. Now let's animate these objects. Let's open our animate tab here. And what we want to do is to start recording our frames, of course, to create these animations. But first we need to establish where exactly we want this animation to stop and show all objects together, and when we want them to sort of shoot out on the sides as camera goes through. But let's disable out keyframe for now and go back a little bit. Obviously, don't forget to turn on the helpers, which you can find on the right properties panel right here. So you just turn on global settings helpers so you can start seeing your camera. I'm going to move a little bit sideways in the scene so we can start seeing where our camera actually is. And right, so we open the gate, we come to the point at about 150 maybe. Let's check camera view. So go in our camera desktop cam, enter the camera view. Okay, and then as we go forward, we want these objects to start pushing out away from 150 dVH here. And I think what we can do, we can set up a static point for how long we want them to be in one place. Let's zoom out a little bit more, something along these lines, 120 to 150. All right, let's create a keyframes for our group, which is the ingredient one group. What we want to do at the moment is just to keep the position in the same place. So we're gonna record the y-axis at the moment, because y-axis is the axis that actually goes up and down in our scene. We're gonna scroll down to the bottom of the animation and keyframes here. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna go back to 120 and we're gonna record the same keyframe again. So this is the point where all the objects are in one piece, and when we scroll through, we're gonna actually see them in one piece for our animation. So next step is to animate them in, so they are coming out of the water together. And then another point is to make them break away and let the camera fly through. As we are at 120, what we'll also need to do is to set the default state, the static state, for each of those little objects here, and we can do so by recording the frames for them as well. What we want to do in here is we want to record the rotation and the position as well for all 3 objects in the group. So I'm just clicking on the parameters here and just recording keyframes for each of those elements. We're not going to change their scale, so we're not bothering with that at the moment. And as you can see now, we have all 3 objects and their rotation and position is recorded. We want to keep it the same for that period of time until we reach the 150. And let's record those settings again for each object here, just like so. Okay. And what we want to do now is we want to maybe record first them breaking away from the camera. So as we're going forward, we want the camera to actually not go inside of these objects, but we want them to move, to push away. And for that, we just need to create a little animation. All right, exit camera view, move to 160 here. And now we can actually move these objects probably just by dragging them away one by one. So this object is going this way. This object we would like to go up, and this object we want to go a little bit down and here, just like so. Let's move this a little bit forward. So now we have these frames set up. We might want them to also rotate a little bit, but before we decide, let's have a look, let's preview. So we're approaching the object, and as we come close to it, yeah, exactly. This is exactly what we want to have. We want to have this kind of break part to actually continue our journey forward. All right. What we want to do now is we want to create another animation when these objects coming out of the water are connecting together. So let's do that. Let's go back to our editor. Go back to 120. Maybe just adjust our camera more like this, so we can see what's going on. And we're going to start this animation from the very first keyframe in the scene. So let's go back to the first keyframe in the scene. And what we can do now is we can start maybe with the biggest object and put it in a different position. So we're going to put it underwater, first of all. Maybe we're going to avoid, obviously, some of the other objects in the scene. Maybe put us in underwater here, and we want to rotate it slightly, so when it comes into the scene, it creates this kind of a nice effect. So it's not just floating from a position to another position, but it's also rotating. And now we can actually preview that really quickly. Yeah, this is how the object is actually going to come into this group. So what we want to do, we want to do the same with other objects. Let's do that. Okay, let's animate the rest of those objects that we have in our scene. This one we probably want to just go from the bottom here, because it's not touching any object, and it can just come from the bottom. We're going to rotate it a little bit as well, so it kind of creates this nice effect of it coming in and sort of rotating in. we want to preview all of these animations before we're going to sort of make final decision on how they work. So let's do that. All right, so it's coming from the bottom. It's not rotating as much. I'm not sure why. Well, let's check our settings here on this part. So let's move it a little bit differently, just like so, and see how it looks like now. All right, so it's coming out. It's rotating a little bit, which is absolutely fine. We might want to push it a little bit to the side, so it's coming not just from the bottom, but from the left. Let's do that now. We have it, and we pushed a little bit this way. Quick preview again. And you notice why I'm previewing these things like that is because I already have those frames. I don't want to touch anything. I just want to change in the specific position. So I don't want to come back and then, you know, find the frame that I selected already. And it's just easier to do that. Okay, perfect. So as you can see now, the two objects already animated. Looks pretty cool. Let's go back to our editor, and there our last object left. We want it to come from a bit of a behind of this whole scene. So let's just select it, and what we want to do is we want this object to come from further here. Also, of course, from underwater, but we just move it a little bit down here. Move it underwater. And in here, we can create some of the rotation animation for it. So let's rotate it this way. Let's rotate it a little bit this way, and maybe on this axis. Let's have a look. All right. Let's see, it's coming together. It's a little bit interfering with our another object that we have. And what we can do actually with this particular case is that we can time it in a slightly different way. So they are starting just after each other as well. But I think what we can do is we can still adjust the animation of this third object that's coming out. Let's go back to the editor. And what I think we should do is we should move it. We should move it to the right side rather than to the left. Let's see. Okay, so now it's coming together from 3 different positions. So this is how we are sort of putting together these 3 objects. And, you know, you can just play with these animations as much as you want, but for the purposes of this preview, we're going to leave it at that. Let's go back to the editor. One last thing I want to do here is to move this object more to the left. I guess that's the final bit for finessing. Okay, so they're coming together, diving back into the water. Perfect. Right, so we have animation. What we also want to do is we don't want this to be static at any point when we're scrolling, because at the moment it's kind of moving forward, but these objects are coming together and then just stay the same. One last thing I want to show you is that you can actually animate the group as well. And what we can do with the group, you remember that we selected these frames here for the group. Let's go back exactly where we are. A gradient group, right? At 120, and we're keeping it at this point. But what we can also do here now is to make it rotate a little bit. And we can maybe make it rotate from the beginning of this animation. So let's just do that. Let's make rotation animation for the group here. And let's rotate it up to the point where we are moving apart. So that was 160, I think, dVH, right? Let's move, no, 150, sorry, 150 dVH and 160, yeah, 160. So let's make a very tiny movements, very tiny rotations on this object here. So like minuscule numbers, 10, 12, just a tiny bit more so it's more visible, 15, 30, 22 on this one, and let's say 24 here. All right, let's have a look. As we can see, objects are coming out of the water, they're moving. This object is not staying as a static, it's rotating as well. And yeah, it looks really cool. So, all right, let's move on to the last part of this, is just making colors for these elements. Let's go back to the editor. Let's change to the 3D edit mode. And what we need to do is just change the colors of these three elements right here. The first one we will make a little bit more pinkish. So let's put it this. Maybe a little bit of emission color here, just a tiny bit. All right. Our next object, we will make it probably a bit more yellow. All right. And adjust the reflection to make it more reflective, maybe 22. And the last object we will make transparent, so it resembles water actually for us. Let's make the metalness 100, let's make this 30, and then let's turn on transparency mode and move the opacity way down to something like 20 maybe, and adjust the settings right here so it's reflective but not too much. Okay, so we have our object in the scene. All right, let's have a look. Okay, moving forward, we have our objects coming together. All right, we're gonna fast forward again on the final parts and talk a bit more about the effects. Alright, so we have completed our new 3D scene for this remix, and let's just go back into the 3D editor and do some final touches on this scene. So what I would like to do is I would like to have some effects for like a color correction, so we have a little bit more vibrant colors in the scene, and then we'll also enable fog to complete the look. Well, let's have a look at the hue saturation effect. And what we can do here is just adjust a little bit of our saturation just to bring a little bit more vibrancy into our scene. Let's have a quick preview. It definitely brought up more colors into the scene, as you can see. So all of the assets, all of the 3D models now looking more vibrant, more colorful, which is nice. Let's have a look at the end product. Beautiful. So I'm happy with this. Let's go back to the editor and let's check the fog. Okay, how much fog we would like to see in our scene. We'll probably change the settings a little bit so it's a bit further. Let's preview. Beautiful. That's how you can add a completely different 3D scene into existing template. And we're going to move on to a next chapter of this tutorial where my colleague Bura will explain how to change all of the UI for this particular template.